Hi there, this is Shola, and in this session, we're going to go over some key pillars of entrepreneur economics so that you can enter 2020 with a crisp, clean, and clear plan for a new strategy to execute in your business for the next decade, 2020 and beyond. So let's get started, shall we? If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, go ahead and pound that subscribe button so that there's more of this to come. Okay. So I want to begin this by saying that this is one of those rare instances where I can actually put to use my credentials in from school. Okay. Having studied economics at Swarthmore and Oxford, I can tell you that it is a very useful trait to be able to apply what you do every day in the marketplace, getting your hands dirty as an entrepreneur with the theory. So this is one of those few areas, kind of like giving yourself a refresher course in business math or algebra where you can actually put to use the things that you learn in school. Okay, so let me pull up first though and say that everybody should have a business mental model that enables them to make sense of um, the world they're in when it comes to their business. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, you're always hearing about all these theories and you're always being introduced to new ideas every day. And at the end of the day, you always want to be able to take an idea and put it into a bucket, right? So the framework that I use is called the four pillar model, and it consists of four key pillars, right? First pillar is strategy. Second pillar is um, traffic, okay, or an audience. Third pillar is conversions, okay. Fourth pillar is the offer. And what you want to do when you're thinking about your ultimate goal, which is every business owner's ultimate goal is, 99% of businesses goals, a business owner's goal is the following. You want to be able to generate consistent leads and customers, right? With the same consistency that somebody would have if they were in a day job, right? And why is that the goal? Well, if you look at the data, right, approximately 10 to 20% of any country's population make jobs for the other 90 to 80%, which means that if people are going to work day in and day out, okay, getting their paycheck once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, then somebody has figured out how to generate sales daily to the extent that they can pay their payroll, all right, month in and month out, right? So ultimately, that's your goal to build a business, all right, that generates revenue daily, just like you breathe almost instantaneously, all right? You want to be able to generate, okay, your revenue and leads with the level of consistency that enables you to pay your team and create jobs. All right, with all of that said, I think that you'll find what we're about to walk through here insanely useful when it comes to making sense of the world, right? I like to think of business as a game, right? And imagine a playing field, and in the playing field, you have these seven key actors, right? So, really, strategy is about answering the core questions about these seven key actors, but more importantly, understanding what the players are, right? You would agree, wouldn't you, that if you don't know the rules of a game, the rules of engagement, if you don't know who the players are, the likelihood of your winning at that game is pretty low, right? So, what I would ask you as you're sitting here and you're looking at this, have you made a decision about each one of these players, number one? And number two, are you aware of each one of these players, right? So, when you're sitting back and you are dealing with problems or challenges in your business, are you able to sort of like the pieces of a puzzle? You ever do a puzzle and the first thing you do is you dump all the puzzle pieces onto a table and then you start moving them around trying to figure out how to piece them together. First, you do the border, all right, and then you start putting the other pieces together. Or if you're playing Scrabble, right, you get your pieces and the of tile, and then you put them on the little wooden thingy, and then you start moving them around to figure out how you can make the word a word. All right, that's going to you'll be able to play to get the highest points possible. Well, the same thing goes with um, this analogy, right? Just like a Scrabble game, you're going to be given different letters. Some have more points than others. When you begin your journey and you begin this game, you're going to have certain factors, okay, in your particular situation, in your particular market. You're going to have some tiles that have more points than others, right? You might have more points than your competition, all right? You might have, if you ever played Scrabble, okay, if you might have a Q, all right, and then your competition that's worth whatever 10 points, and your competition has a an A that's worth a 1 point, all right. Okay, so let's just walk through uh, clockwise each one of these factors, all right, or rather counterclockwise. So the first one is the market. What I find is that the best way to think about the market is um, a river, all right, or ocean. I'm sure you would agree that if the tide of a river or an ocean is flowing in your direction, okay, if the wind and the tide is flowing in your favor, it's going to require a lot less effort for you to row. All right, so you can have the same a boat, you can have the same amount of strength, but if the tide is flowing in the right direction, your job of getting from point A to point B in your little boat is going to be a lot easier. All right. Similarly with the market, if a market is big enough and it's growing, okay, that's equivalent of a tide flowing in your direction. Okay, so most people, they think about getting the results they want by trying to buy the best boat or by trying to um, work out so they can be strong enough to row, and they spend so little time thinking about, okay, let me put myself in a river or a ocean where the tide is already going in the direction that I want it. Because here's the thing, and you can relate to this if you've ever watched a nature show or ever been on a boat, okay, or sailing yourself. You don't have the strength to like change the tide of the ocean, right? Like a normal human being, okay, doesn't have the strength to change the tide of the ocean. So whenever you are thinking about market entry, the first question you need to answer is this a market that is big enough? Is it growing? And a market that's big enough and growing is the equivalent of the tide going in your favor. Okay. I hat tip to Richard Koch's book, The Star Principle, that I highly encourage you check out. Okay. Second issue is the customer. All right. The second factor that is related to this game, the strategy game that we're playing, that is of the biggest importance is your customers. Okay, are your customers, if within any market, you have some customers who have high income and high urgency. Okay, and a lot of demand for what you sell, and then you have customers that have low income. All right, they have low urgency, meaning they can take it or leave it. All right, so within every market, you instantly want to find those customers that have high demand and high urgency, because your job of presenting a message to them that sells is going to be a lot easier. The analogy that I like to use is selling water, okay, in the desert, okay, to millionaires. I'm sure you would agree that if you were the only one, okay, which is the ideal situation to be in any market. A market, by the way, that there are few suppliers just like you. If you were the only one or one of few people selling water, okay, in the desert to millionaires, truth be told, you wouldn't have to have the best water, right? Because you have a customer base that has high income and they have urgency. So you don't have to create the world's best bottled water in order to, potentially make hundreds of dollars just selling one bottle of water. I would even go so far as to say that if your water was a little muddy, but it was still drinkable, but if you were in the desert, um, one of few people selling to millionaires, you would make over like a bandit. Okay, if you flip the script, if you were in, the Arctic, okay, by, um, you know, fresh water, okay, and there were 100 other people trying to sell cold bottles of water to like millionaires, you would face some competition. Why? Because the market is not the tides of the market, if you will, isn't flowing in your direction. It's so easy for people to do it themselves, right? Like they could easily take some snow and thaw it, and they'd have all the water that they needed. So they could do it themselves, or they could turn to your competition. All right. So that's the second factor. Aftermarket is the customers, and again, having a mental checklist about income, ability to pay, and urgency when you are trying to enter a market. You immediately, it's almost like entering a room. There are two groups of people: people that have high urgency and high income, and people that have low income and low urgency. And I'll be the first to tell you that I often have made the mistake of going after the people that have low urgency and low income. All right. And those are the hardest sells. All right. Now, the third factor, probably after the factor that's out, the factor that is outside of your control, so to speak, that matters the most is the market and then the customers. But the factor that is in your control that arguably makes the most important um, um like it's the most important import is you. All right. And I've actually separated you and your team. Right. Now the reality situation is that all of us come to the table with a unique set of strengths and weaknesses, okay, and blind spots. And if you don't know your particular strengths and weaknesses when you enter and play in this game, you are not going to get the results that you want, right? So here's a really great example. Let's just say you have two people, and both of them, one is more self-aware, right? One person knows, I'm kind of a couch potato, and but I read a lot. So if I'm going to play a game, it's probably better for me to play Scrabble or chess, right? Um, because my strengths are mental, intellectual. All right. Now, the other person, well, they're honest with themselves. They're very athletic and they have spent years playing all manner of sports. So, if they have the opportunity to choose a game to play that they're more likely to win in, it's probably better for them to play like soccer, rugby, or tennis than to try to play an intellectual game. And so, similarly, like when you're going to play a game, you have to figure out like what your strengths are and where you have a unique competitive advantage. Because if you try to choose a game that's the equivalent of playing soccer when you're a couch potato that's been playing chess and Scrabble all the time, you're not going to win it. Similarly, if you're not the headiest person, but you're super athletic and you sit down with someone who spent years playing chess or Scrabble, you're not going to win. All right. So, the tools that we typically use to figure out our strengths and weaknesses are personality tests, and you can Google some of these, like the Colby test, like Myers-Briggs. I don't know if you've taken the 16 personalities. This is a really brilliant test to take that's going to let you know. All right. I'm just going to rattle off some tools. You want to take these tools that will enable you to see, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses. One is the Myers-Briggs test that you can find at 16 personalities. Another one is the Colby test. You can just Google that. I'll pull it up on the screen. Colby test. All right. Great test to take. All right. Another test to take is Strengths Finders. Okay. You can just Google these and pull that up. All right. Another test to take is brilliant, absolutely brilliant test. So this test is so important that when I'm going to do serious business with someone, if they, like my first qualification is their willingness to take this test. If the willingness isn't there, then I know it's probably not going to be a good fit. So this is another test, the value hyphen test. Another test that you can take is the wealth dynamics test. All right, let me just pull that up. Okay. Wealth dynamics. Okay. And those are just a few. Now, here's the thing. There's a saying, you can't see your own, you know what? And what I would, for anybody who might be watching to say, huh, that's a lot of work and I already know what I'm good at. What I would ask you is to think about this game. If you are in competition with somebody who has taken the wealth dynamics test, all right, has taken the 16 personalities test, has taken the strengths finders test, has taken the Colby test, has taken the Myers-Briggs test, right? They have invested, the equivalent of, anywhere from 100 to $1,000 to get a unique 360-degree view of what their strengths and weaknesses are. You are over here and they are over here. Who do you think has um, the strategic advantage? I would argue that if you were to go to the Inc. 500, okay, and this is how serious this is, Inc. 5,000 list, all right. If you were to do a survey of Inc. 5,000 CEOs, all right, and you would have asked them a simple question like, how many of you have, all right, you can find this list many places, all right. How many of you have heard of, raise your hand if you've heard of the Colby test? Raise your hand if you've heard of the Myers Briggs or 16 personality test. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Strength Finders test. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Value Hyphen test. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Wealth Dynamics test. In a room full of 100 people, okay, 90% of them would say yes. So, what I would submit to you is that you must commit to making sure that you don't fall victim to your blind spots, which is the equivalent of saying you can't see your own arse. Okay, the perspective that you have is you on you, but you do not have the perspective of how the world sees you. And oftentimes, our greatest strengths we are unaware of because it comes so naturally to us. Okay. It's the equivalent of somebody walking up to a fish in the ocean and saying to them, "Hey, have you ever thought about making a career out of like breathing on the water?" Like it comes so naturally to them that we often don't think that it is a talent. Okay, moving along. The next input is your team. At the end of the day, as entrepreneurs, we have like two inputs: labor and capital. All right, and we take those inputs and like ingredients in a salad or baking a cake, we have to mix those inputs together in order to get a particular output. But the reality situation is, as I'm sure you would agree, if you are using different inputs, different ingredients, all right, with a different recipe, the recipe might include how long you leave the ingredients out. It might include how hot you make the oven, all right, how hot you make the fire. Those the different ingredients combined with a different recipe is going to yield a different um, an output. And what ends up happening is that oftentimes entrepreneurs and digital entrepreneurs are particularly guilty of this. We really try to bring all the inputs to the table, right? So we try to be the chief marketer. We try to be the chief, the CIO, all right, chief information officer. We try to be the chief revenue officer. We try to be the chief financial officer. We try to be the head of customer service. We try to be the IT director. Okay, we try to be the head of social media. And we really try to wear all of the hats, okay, that are needed inside of business. And the reality situation is that there's a few of those hats that only you should be wearing, and the other hats somebody else should be wearing. All right. And so I'm a big fan of delegating like as quickly as possible because you just simply can't do it all with only 1,440 minutes in a day. Even if you only sleep 4 hours a day, there's still not enough time to do it all. Okay. Now, the next factor is your investors. And this is an area that I feel particularly passionate about, raising awareness about the fact that if you decide to go into business and you're self funding, you should accept the fact that you are also an investor, right? Because you're investing your own private equity. Private equity is just a fancy way of saying your own money, right? So either you're going to invest in somebody else's capital, all right, equity money, or your own capital. And so when you're um, relating to your business, you can't just wear the hat of an entrepreneur. All right. An entrepreneur is always thinking about the positives, right? The investor is always thinking about the negatives. How do I lose money? And I would submit to you that entrepreneurs who learn how to think like investors when it comes to their business, which is often hard to do because we're very biased. Okay. An investor is paid to be unbiased. An entrepreneur is paid to be biased, meaning you're paid to believe that your idea is going to work despite the obstacles. All right. An investor isn't paid that way. And so the unfortunate thing and I see this in my colleagues and my friends, my inner circle, and sometimes in myself, is that oftentimes we, as entrepreneurs, we don't make the smartest decisions with the capital of our business when we're self-funding, because when we really should be wearing the investor hat, we are wearing the entrepreneur hat. And so I would submit to you that if you're going to be self-funded, you need to have some checks and balances in place for that, okay? Or you'll make the kind of mistakes that we all do when it comes to the business. Or you need to have like sound investors who can advise you. All right. So the next factor is your inputs. Now, this is a really important um, aha moment that I'm going to give to you. Most people don't realize that when you're starting an online business, one of your biggest suppliers is the traffic networks, right? So you must have traffic supplied to your website from one of the GLAFID sources. And GLAFID is just an acronym for Google and related properties like YouTube and Android, LinkedIn, which is owned by Microsoft, okay, um, and Apple, all right, Facebook and related properties like WhatsApp, okay, and Instagram, Amazon and Twitter, right? 90 plus percent, 80 to 90% of internet users visit one of those sites at least once a week, if not once a day, right? So the majority, 80% of the attention on the internet is held by not those 20% of companies, but those what 0.001% of companies, right? So when you begin to look at these companies as your suppliers and not just as websites, you will begin to change the game for yourself. And I will submit to you that those of us who really um, latch on to the saying by Dan Kennedy that the person who can pay the most for a customer wins, understand that when you go to your suppliers and you buy what you need from them, which the equivalent of paid advertising versus SEO or social media traffic, your business becomes a lot more stable. The analogy that I like to use is as follows: imagine if you were running a elite furniture building, elite furniture business, right? And you built the most pristine furniture for the high net worth individuals in your town. You would agree that you must have the best oak wood, right? The best pine in order to build your furniture. Well, here's the thing: if you are only getting your material, uh, the wood, every time you write a great blog post or every time you post something catchy on Instagram, that's going to leave you feeling pretty uncertain, right? Because the reality situation is that if you don't have wood for your business, you know, you can't build the furniture. Well, for some reason, people have forgot the basic rules of business when it comes to the internet, that you have to pay for what you need. And so many people are in a situation where in order to input their digital businesses with what they need, which is traffic, they have to day in and day out come up with um, content that these networks will love. But that ends up creating a situation where people basically have to become media companies when what they really wanted to do is just stay in the furniture business. And so that's why I would encourage you to, as quickly as possible, get yourself to the point where you can just buy what you need. You're going to get traffic from the major traffic sources through excellent content, all right, or advertising. But the reality situation is that even if you provide excellent content, you have no idea if content that might be good today, tomorrow the algorithms might say, oh, it's not good. See, when the web started, the commercial web really took off in the late 90s. There were less than 100,000 websites, okay? Now they're over a billion. So what the web really needed in its infancy was like valuable content. So you gave the major traffic networks valuable content, they sent you traffic. Well, that doesn't work anymore because there's an overabundance of great content on the internet. And so that's why if you want your business to have the stability of the equivalent of running your furniture shop and being able to pay for the wood that you need, all right, or running your bakery and being able to actually pay for the flour that you need versus being in a position where if you don't write a great blog post or post something catchy on social media, you don't have the supplies that you need that day. You must invest in advertising. Okay. Um, the last input that I want to talk about is your competition, and I have a little. Um, I have a little. This is your suppliers. I have a little box within the box because your competition isn't just the person who leads that business, but also its team, right? So you're playing against not only the leader of that team, all right, which is of the founder or business owner of your competition, but also their team. So you can be equally matched, pound for pound with the leader of um, the other your competition. But if your team isn't as good as their team, you're not going to win, right? So I would submit to you that when you're thinking about um, like what market to enter, and when you're thinking about what product or service you can create, understanding all of these factors. Okay, again, there's a reason why there's a small 50% of small businesses fail after what 5 to 10 years. Okay, actually, very few businesses are still around after 10 years. All right. Some are still after 50% are approximately around after 5 years. But the reality situation is that most people who go into business, they're hoping that that business that create will be a permanent replacement of whatever jobs that they have that provides enough income for them to invest and also hire so they're not working all the time and also to enjoy the lifestyle that they want. So to summarize your new strategy, the new strategy game for the next decade, and you're getting ahead of the game in 2020. Think about your situation as a game. All right, and when you want to win a game, always forget these seven players. Forgetting some of these players is the equivalent of going out on a playing field and you only bring three players to the field and the other team brings seven, right? Like you're playing handicap. So number one is the market. Okay. Number two is your customers. And remember the two customer slash clients, if you have a service business, remember the two factors that I mentioned, which is ability to pay, all right, income and urgency, okay? When you walk into a room or the equivalent of market and you can go left or imagine two groups of people. On the left are the people that have low income and low urgency. On the right is a group of people that have high income and high urgency. And your job when you walk into any room, all right, or any market is to immediately be able to separate the two groups, okay? Because you can easily spend hours talking to people who will hog your time. And then you'll find out that, oh my God, I'm talking to the wrong person. I'm talking to the people who are in the low urgency, low income crowd. That's so important. Many people would identify that as lead qualification, okay? Third factor is you, all right, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses and blind spots are because nobody can see their own ass. And again, the litmus test for whether or not you probably are missing something is when you think about taking the tests that I've mentioned to you, you instantly say to yourself, oh, I don't need to take tests. I know what I'm good at. Well, in reality, the situation is that if you don't take these tests, if you don't get this feedback, all right, the likelihood that you really know what you're good at is extremely low. All right. If the founders of the world's best companies, okay, need these tests, all right, and that's your competition, then you need them as well. All right. Fourth factor is your team. Okay. Um, what factors that you need to look at when it comes to your team are inextricably linked to what your strengths are. You want people who are strong, all right, where you're weak, all right. That's the key factors. And if you don't know where you're strong and where you're weak, um, you it's the equivalent of like considering yourself a lid and and you're looking for other lids when you should be. It's like the equivalent of seeing yourself a jar and you're looking for other jars when what you really should be doing is interviewing for lids, right? If you're a lid, look for a jar. If you're a jar, look for lids. Okay. Next factor is the investors. And the big aha moment here is that either you are going to be self funded, in which case that's yet another hat for you to wear. As an entrepreneur, you're also going to have to wear the hat of an investor. Entrepreneurs are trained to think optimistically, okay, and to be risk loving, to use the economics term. Investors are trained to be risk averse and want to avoid risk at all time. So you need to be aware of the fact that if you are going to make the right decisions about your business, decisions that are not driven by your emotions to see the business succeed, you got to have systems in place to switch up hats, okay? Next factor is the competition. We talked about that. And the last factor is your suppliers. I hope that you leave this session with a firm understanding that the GLAFIT companies that I mentioned, GLAFAT, is a great way to think about the majority of the businesses on the internet, okay, that control most of the attention. Your business must have a GLAFIT policy, right? If you're going to do anything, all right, you you must render unto Caesar what is Caesar, all right? GLAFAT, all right? Google, which owns YouTube and Android and other related properties. LinkedIn, which is owned by Microsoft, okay? Apple, all right? Facebook owns Instagram, all right? And WhatsApp, all right? WhatsApp, Amazon, okay? And also Twitter. Important to note by Amazon is tools like um, Dropbox and all the other hosting cloud hosting tools are owned by Amazon, right? So chances are many times you load a page, okay, that's cloud computing, and um, um, Amazon plays a critical role in the infrastructure of the internet. All right. So this is Shola again. If you found value in this, I want you to bookmark this. Go ahead and drop a comment in the comment section and let me know which one of these players do you feel like you have to um, yeah, which one of these players do you feel like you need to work on the most? Which one of these players were you unaware of? What is your biggest aha moment when it comes to a new mindset with regard to thinking about your inputs? All right. I mean, sorry, your suppliers, or a new mindset when it comes to thinking about yourself as if you're self-funding your business, you are what was called a private equity investor. It's like your personal private equity investor, right? Just like you have a private investor and they just invest their own inputs, your own capital, where you are a private investor, okay, into your own business. When it comes to thinking about your team, you must have self awareness through the strategies. Some of the strategies that I mentioned to you. Sidebar is there are also different questionnaires that you can complete if you check out Perry Marshall's book. All right, 80/20 principle. You can send. There's a really great um, tool that you can use, create a questionnaire that you send to people in your circle, and they're going to send you back data that's going to give you data, meaning answers that's going to give you feedback on what your blind spots are. Once you identify your strengths and your blind spots, then that is critical to hiring and partnering. If you find that you've ever tried to hire somebody or partner with someone and it didn't go well, chances are you didn't have a firm awareness of like your core strengths. All right. And that's pretty much it. Okay. This one was pretty long. And I think that if you revisit this and feel free to um, uh, add your own additions or subtractions. If you find that a PDF would be useful to this, go ahead and drop a comment in the comment section, and we can discuss how I can email it over to you. And if you have other thoughts about this, go ahead and drop a comment, because I'm slowly but surely building up these videos, and then other people will see it, and we can continue to crowdsource very effective solutions. Okay, this is Shola. Take care and take action. And here's wishing you a fantastic 2020. Remember the four pillar model. S is your 80/20 strategy. Um, T stands for your 80/20 traffic method. Okay. C stands for 80/20 conversion method or strategy. And O stands for your 80/20 offer strategy. Take care and take action.